Welcome, everybody. I'm Luzette Jaimes. I'm the co-creator and also co-director at Ashoka, and it's a pleasure to be here with you to create this welcoming space in these very difficult moments. And I know that your well-being and all well-being for all of us depends on a number of factors. Particularly today, we have two wonderful guests who are going to share their stories, their practices, and their points of view regarding this topic. Ahora Sofia Diaz is a doctor. She has a PhD in human development, master's in organizational development, and a teaching degree in psychology, family therapy, multiple brain sciences, in which she's worked for over 20 years, and she's also published a book in Spanish and in English called The Three Faces of the Brain, understanding how we feel, how we think. We also have Dr. Eduardo Cavallo, who's a psychiatrist who specializes in Jungian analysis. He works with his patients to understand their inner being so that they grow, flourish, reach their goals, and develop. Currently, he is the head of the Jungian Psychiatrist Society, and he's part of the International Society of Psychiatrists. Thank you both for your generosity and for being here with us today, sharing your experience and your knowledge with us. We love starting with your stories. So the first question is, what has been your personal path to well-being? Aura Sofia, if you could start, that'd be wonderful. Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. It's wonderful to be here with you. My own path, my personal path started in the Venezuelan Andes. I was born to Tachiran parents, and I had a wonderful grandmother she was from the Corsica region. She was a woman. She was very feisty. She raised her children by herself. She was an example to follow. And in fact, she used to say, I am not done. I've got a lot to do in life. And we heard this time and again. If you fell down, if something happened, hey, get up, move on, get up, move on. There, you're going to trip up, you're going to have difficulties, but life is not over. You've got a lot of life to live yet. No one can discriminate against you. No one can knock you down. Nobody can push you off your path. And then back in 1953, so I was born before that, my mom took me to the capital city because I want children who studies. I don't want them to be living off in as farmers, because we were farmers. We were actually family of farmers, and my mom wanted us to go to the capital city, to Caracas, to study, to learn. So we all went to school, we all learned, and then in 58, thereabouts, I started studying languages, which at the time was quite different. But there was an aunt of ours who lived in Switzerland, and she took me to Switzerland. I didn't speak a word of French. And then there was a little bit of Spanish there, a little bit of Italian there, I studied there, and I came back to Venezuela 2 years later, and I started studying psychology. Of course, I married a European. I have two children, two wonderful boys, and I've got a wonderful daughter, and I've got three wonderful grandchildren, and I'm very proud of them. Afterwards, My father sold the farm. We were no longer farmers, moved to Caracas, and started to work in a construction company and invited me to be a manager in the company. And I said, okay, I can manage this. But along the way, I realized I didn't like that. I liked psychology. So I started studying with Virginia Satira, and I started studying specifically family therapy. And I worked in that for many years. I followed her to Argentina, wherever she was going. I went. I would spend months and months on end with her, studying with her, learning from her. I studied family behavior, my family's, whatever I liked, whatever I didn't like. I looked at my uncles and my brothers. I understood quite a bit about me, and all of this prepared me to study neuroscience. And then I studied that for 20 some years with my teacher who passed away in 2003. Something else that my grandmother taught me, and I didn't understand at the time, was be careful with what you think, because thoughts become reality. Or thoughts, literally, thoughts tickle or itch. And I didn't understand that. So we now understand that this is actually the case. Your thoughts will affect your physical state. We know this now. We know this now. So then I focused on neuroscience, on on education. We set up a school for the homeless kids, and we treated them wonderfully. We treated the kids wonderfully, and within 1 year, they were able to go through 3 grades. These are children who had grown up on the streets, and they were able to pass 3 grades in 1 year. I think the brain is like a map for living. It, it's like a coaching that I do. I don't call it therapy. I call it coaching because it's a little different from what I do. I don't have like a schedule or a time slot. And I work on acting, feeling, and thinking. And how do I cultivate this in my life? I grow. I grow and I grow. When I stop to think about it, I was never really a teenager or child. I was always a very serious person. I was an adult even as a child. I I, I tried to open my mind. It was very difficult for me to just sit still. I always trusted this energy that unites us, that we like, things that we like. For example, I would talk with Eduardo. He's not a traditional psychiatrist. He's a he's a special person, and Ashoka's behind this, and Esalen is behind this. I love Esalen. I used to go regularly, and I plan to go back. There's nothing impossible for me. Everything is possible. I think Eduardo's not going to like this. But if you put a lot of light on your consciousness, it's not it. I think the problem is that there's a lot of ignorance about who I am and what my capacities and skills are. Once we shine light on that, we become more aware and we have greater consciousness and greater awareness. So when I was no longer a farmer, now I'm in Washington with my daughter. She kidnapped me because I was in New York. Now she kidnapped me to her house in Washington. And she's taking great care of me. She's taking great care of me. I'm doing very well. This has been such a wonderful, I've had such a wonderful life experience. It's been very enriching. Thank you so much, Eduardo. Just like Aura. Thank you so much for the invitation, for the opportunity to share with you what we're doing day to day and to think about it together with. And also, I've met Ana Aura Sofia years ago in a clinic in Caracas, but particularly because she she was working with people that were curious about what was happening, but it was a psychotherapeutic clinic, so there was no residencies. We tried to avoid drugs. It was very, very special. And having her there helped us understand the theoretical side of things, and that was really helpful for me and has been very helpful for me in my path. This, these type of conversations are very important because it has allowed me to simplify psychology. Psychology is a map. It's a reference that allows it's something that has become a tool. And discussing these fundamental topics give us these tools to understand what we're doing on a day-to-day basis. And this process has been interesting. I had a very I specifically studied psychotherapy, psychiatry in the university. But if I don't simplify this, it's absolutely useless. It's all for naught. So just a little bit about my path. Fortunately, I had a very wonderful family upbringing, and I also had someone that was very important in my life. Um, I had an aunt, actually a great aunt, and also a godmother. Both of them were very important. And they both said, if someone else can do it, you can do it too. And this is great. These are great lessons that I learned from these people. They opened this possibility of doing what you wanted or living the life you wanted in the way that you wanted to live it. And these experiences mark you. I was like the black sheep in my family. I have to say that. I'm from a very traditional conservative family of doctors, very very traditional family. And really early on, I really felt like I stood out from the standard of this family. I really was not exactly the same as them. And I kept asking myself a question when I was 15. I came across a book said uh, a book called How Can You How Can You Say Hi? Basically, it was talking about there are more things. There are things that go beyond just the day to day. What happens after you say hi? It's a wonderful path about how you can understand there's a full construction inside that talks about me or that speaks of me, that speaks of the other. So this for me was a true discovery because I realized I spoke to myself and I spoke to myself in different ways. One way was scolding myself. If I look at transactional analysis, I was the critical dad. You can't do this, you can't do that, you shouldn't do this, you should avoid that. Okay, so don't cross this line, so don't do this, don't cross the line. And there's also the adult who's the mediator in my head. So we've got the critical father and the boy. This was actually critical for me for years, having this perspective. And then I was able to find a balance between them or peace with them. And I said, okay, I'm not going to listen to them more. They've all integrated. There was a point where they all interacted. At this first meeting, I was surprised. I felt the silence. I'm not talking to myself. There are not all these voices talking inside. And I began to listen from a different perspective, from a different point of view. That's the short of it. I'm not going to really go into the details. And then sometime in my 30s, I had read Jungian analysis before, but I really delved into Jungian psychiatry. And this helped me complete everything. So I was able to find all the different archetypes and I understood the archetypes. So through Jung, we all have patterns that establish how we develop, how we relate to others, how we choose our partners, how we choose activities, how we do what we do. And this opened up a whole new world for me, this world of archetypes. We use this as a reference. We use as a reference the Greek gods and goddesses because it's very it's another way to express ourselves. So this is a whole other world that just opened up to me. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with this. And many of you have asked yourself this question, what god or goddess am I like or I similar to? It's a way for understanding ourselves and it's a way for us to understand within something that's known to us. There was a time that astrology was a big boom. There's a big boom for astrology in Venezuela, and I'm an Aquarius, so I was like the top Aquarius of all times. I was the best of all Aquariuses, and I would use this as a reference point. And my understanding of this archetypal world of archetypes, I was able to see how there are different natures and how these natures interacted with each other, and this allowed me to understand everything. A lot of people There were a lot of people that I really jived with, other people I really didn't jive with, and I was able to understand it through these archetypes. And I was able to delve down subsequently into this archetypal studies. And I believe that Jung has given me a map of the interior, my inside world, and understanding how there's this autonomous exploration, and that's absolutely critical. But when you work with intimately with other people, these different archetypes, these different ways help you. So I think Jung, for me, gave me this map. That's my general perspective. And well-being for me lies in understanding this archetypal pattern, these archetypal understanding the personalities and the natures, and being very, very attuned to what people are saying. I think that's what I've learned. Thank you so much, Eduardo. We've heard a lot about paying attention to our thoughts, to know ourselves, pay attention to patterns, create a space where we can observe ourselves and look at ourselves. So I'd like to invite Aura Sofia to share with us a practice to create this space. It's going to be physical. It's going to be a space for us to centralize ourselves, find an internal peace. Aura Sofia, please. I'm going to do something a little out of order. But before that, I'm going to read something. And that spoke to me because it was saying, how come you're here? You're so old. But being old means being up to date. And this is a poem called I Am Myself, from Virginia Satir from the 80s. And I'd like to ask all of you who are listening to imagine it as if you close your eyes and imagine that you yourselves had written it. okay? As if you yourselves had written it. In the world, there is no one like me. Everything that comes from me is authentically me because I chose it. It all belongs to me, my body, my feelings, my mouth, my voice, my actions towards others and towards myself. I am the owner of my fantasies, of my dreams, of my hopes and my fears. My successes and triumphs belong to me, as do my mistakes and my flaws, because I am familiar, intimately familiar with myself. And doing so, I can love myself and be a friend to myself and to all that is part of me. I know what people think of me, and it may trip me up, and other people I don't even know. But as long as I am friendly and loving to myself, I can find solutions to these puzzles with valor and with hope, and find ways to find out more about myself. However, anything I may do or say or think or feel, this is authentically me. Then some parts of how I thought, how I felt, how I shined, if they turn out inappropriate, I can throw them out and remain with what, and keep what remains and keep the new in its place. I can see, hear, feel, think, say, and do. I have the tools to survive, to be close to others, to be productive, and to make sense and order out of life and things outside myself. I am the owner of myself, and I can rebuild myself. I am myself, and I am well. Virginia Satir. This is something I would read regularly in the 80s, and it just popped into my life yesterday. I just saw it the other day, so I decided I had to read it. Something that really centers me is breathing in the body's 3 cavities. You centralize, you slow down, you connect to peace. This truly helps you. And this is how it works. Breathing. I breathe in deeply, and the air breath goes up to my brain. I can feel it with my hand on my forehead. I breathe in, I breathe out through my mouth. A little, I can voice the breath of relaxation. I can make a sound as I breathe out. Then I put my hand on my chest. We'll do this soon. I put my hand then on my chest and I breathe in. I lift my hand up as I do so. I may count to 1, 2, 3 as I breathe. And when you exhale, let it out. Let out the sound of relaxation, of tranquility. My hand should sweat a little as I breathe in and breathe out. And my 3rd cavity is in my belly. I breathe in. I breathe in. I bring the air all the way down to my belly till my hand pushes up, and then I breathe out. Let's do this 3 times just to practice. Let's close our eyes. Put our hand on our third eye, or the third eye, or your forehead. You know the word you want to use for this. I breathe in. I am with myself and only myself right now. I am with my breath, just I with myself. I breathe in, out, in, I place my hand on my chest. I breathe in. I feel my blood renewing with my breath. It goes into my heart and goes into my lungs, and I am fully renewed. What can I be in life? I can rest and be at one with myself. I breathe in. Your hand should sweat because you're bringing air into your chest. There's nothing but myself. Just I exist. I put my hand on my belly and I bring the breath down. I draw it down and breathe in. My oxygen is refreshing. It relaxes me before I sleep. I'm here with myself, present before I go to sleep. Now let's come back to where we are right now. This connects you with peace, because peace is here. Peace is in the trees I'm looking at, in the skies I'm staring out at. Peace is here on earth, in the smiles that I make, in the smiles I see in others. The peace is here. The problem is that we disconnect from it. And one wonderful thing we can do is focus and then defocus. And sometimes focusing helps us see things again, so we focus once again. Peace is not something that we cannot reach. It's there. It depends on you. As my friend said to me yesterday, we need to put peace in action. We have to act upon peace. We can't just feel it and think about it. We need to act on it and act it out. And that was my message right now. I believe that this opportunity is for us to go within and to grow, and to review and to look in, just like Eduardo said it. We can look into who we are, review who we are, look within. Who am I? Who am I? This is a moment for us to ask ourselves who we are, to know how we are going to act when we can go back to acting outside, when we can go out and act. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sofia. And now we have a practical question. Do you do this kind of exercise to become more centered all day long, every day? What would you recommend? Well, I do it whenever I think it's necessary. I do it in the morning because in the morning what I do is to be thankful. When I think about my country right now, for instance, I am so thankful for a hot shower, for the water that comes out of the pipes of my taps. I'm grateful for the food I can eat. I'm grateful for the sun. I thank for my bed. I'm thankful for my bed. I'm thankful for everything. There is so much to be grateful for. So I do that in the morning to be able to say thank you. So I do that breathing exercise. I have a pacemaker, so I focus on my chest. I have to have a lot of air in my chest area. So I fill my chest with air in the mornings and I say thank you. Thank you for everything. I'm so, so grateful. And I take the opportunity to say thank you. And you can do it every now and again, because you can do it whenever you like by yourself. You can do it for your abdomen. When I go out, for instance, I go to the supermarket to buy something. So I take a deep breath and I do it. I do that breathing exercise lots of times because that takes my energy down. It grounds me. So that's what I wanted to share with you as a practical exercise. Gratefulness, that is the basis for life itself. I think Deepak Chopra said, everything that you're grateful for and that you say thank you for is enough as a practice for life. So thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Eduardo, it would be wonderful to hear from you if you have any specific exercises or practices that you use to ground yourself, to become more centered. And then after that, we can talk about managing emotions. Well, I'd like to thank Aura for that exercise. We agree, I think. I mean, I couldn't have done it better. I think there's a timeline throughout life. You know, life happens over a timeline, and then you have a vertical axis that has to do with energy. So thank you, Aura, for connecting those two axes. Those of us who work over longer processes know that the journey is extremely important. And part of being able to enjoy the place where I was has to do with the preparation to get there, what he did to be able to be on that journey. And there are many, many things missing and that can interfere. And they have to do with a name that Aura mentioned, a word that Aura mentioned, which is peace. if you don't have inner peace, it's very, very hard to enjoy the journey, the path. So how can we get closer to this inner peace? You know, it's easier said than done. It's a very difficult thing to do. Many of us don't have inner peace because we are constantly in contradiction between our nature, our archetypal nucleus, which is our true nature, and how we develop ourselves or where we develop ourselves. So that's something we see frequently, actually, when we talk about how we relate to others between introversion and extroversion. If I'm an introvert and I live in an extrovert world, I'm going to feel uncomfortable, and the other way around too. If I'm an extrovert and I live in an introvert world, I'm going to feel very uncomfortable, and that will mean I'll isolate myself. Introverts are doing very well during the pandemic. Extroverts have been going crazy the past 6 months. And another important topic, at least in Latin America, is the rural area versus urban areas. Some people have a rural nature. If they move to an urban environment, they become very uncomfortable. They are living a contradiction, and the other way around as well. People who are from New York, for instance, and one day they say, that's it, I'm going to go live in the mountains in Vermont. Go crazy because they can't deal with it. You know, they just say, I have to go back to the noise, to an urban setting. And that's the contradiction. Contradiction is a key issue. And most people don't teach us that. They just teach us this is how it should be. So if you have your own nature dressed by what it should be and how you move around, then you're in contradiction. Many years ago, I heard an anecdote that I thought was fantastic for what we're doing here. It had to do with a tribe in Africa where they never said spontaneously what they were going to do. So a child would grow within that tribe, and at a given moment, they would take the kid to the meeting of wise men. And there were toys, there were elements, and they checked to see how the child would relate to these toys and these elements. And they would leave him alone again for a few years. And every now and again, they would expose the child again to the same elements. And then they would check whether there was a coincidence between the first connections, the later connections. And then these wise men would say, this child has the soul of a warrior, or the soul of a carer, or a shaman. And through those connections with natural elements, they were able to recognize the child's nature that promoted what was going to come next. So, since very early on, we express our true nature. Since a very, very early age, we start to recognize who or what we connect with and who and what we don't. What I do like, what I don't like, what I relate to, what I don't relate to. And our first years have a lot to do with that. And then afterwards, there are choices. And if they have to do with my true nature, they will just flow. They will move forward. If not, they will fail. And that's how we carry on. So all this introduction is because I want to share an exercise with you that is very powerful, at least for me, which is to go through the milestones in my life. There are specific situations, specific experiences in our lives that for some reason they have been very significant. That's why we call them milestones. There are many, many major experiences throughout our lives, but these milestones, these experiences are those that we know really, really made a difference. A change, a trip, meeting someone, going through a specific process, and those milestones and how I related to those milestones allow me to know what my true nature is. This archetypal equation allows me to live what we call the archetypal consciousness. How I can live based on my true nature and to do away with that noise of contradiction. If I'm an urban person and I live an urban life, then I will be more likely to be at peace if I live in an urban setting rather than in a small town or in a rural area. So this exercise can take as long as you like. And I will let you explore it at your own leisure. It's your autobiography. When you think of your autobiography, you don't know how surprising it can be. You know, we read romances, we read biographies, but you never think about your own autobiography. Where do I come from? Who are my parents? What did they teach me? What did they tell me? What was my journey? What have been my decisions? What have been my influences? Where did these influences have come from? That is key to understand how I got to where I got and what I can do from now on. Because we can't change what went before. But you can think about what's left of your life. You can consider your true nature, and maybe myself right now will allow me to connect to my inner peace. So that's what we're going to do. As I told you, you can take as long as you like to this exercise. I just want to show it to you in 10 minutes. I'm not going to go into any level of detail, but the idea is to enable you to have a first contact with this experience. There are many ways you can do it. If you have the time, it is recommended that you take a whole day and you start going through your life in stages. So your first memories, your childhood, what happened when you first started school, what was your time in school like, what happened when you became a teenager. So as you became older, I mean, there are many of us here, and I don't want to do it with everyone here because there are too many details. Everybody's different in this group. So we're going to do a superficial version of it. I'm just going to give you some broad instructions, and you think about what comes to you, your memories, and you write them down. You say, oh, I couldn't remember that. This happened when I was 5. But this was my first memory. This is what came to mind. My sister, we were fighting like cats and dogs when we were children. And then finally, we became friends and became really close. You know, it's something that will come to you. So I'm going to ask you to get comfortable. Get comfortable. I'm an expert on relaxation, especially our Sofia's exercise. We'll all be able to relax as quickly as possible. So please get comfortable wherever you are. Close your eyes. Let's enjoy this exercise by taking 3 deep breaths. Taking air into every single cavity of your body. Make sure you are in contact with your own body, and start letting go of anything that makes you feel uncomfortable. Excellent. And now that you have reached this place, try to think of the first memory you have, the first thing you can remember in your life, the first thing that comes to your mind. And acknowledge how old you were at that time. It doesn't have to be precise, but try to remember how old you were when you had this first memory, and who was with you at the time. Where were you living? What was the environment like? What kind of setting was there around you? And based on that first memory, I want you to start to slowly think about the different stages of your life. If you can do it year by year, if you have that kind of memory, you can do it that way. And think about significant experiences that you had along the way. Anything that may have struck you, that may have specifically got your attention in a positive way, or maybe because it brought some pain with it, perhaps a frustration, some kind of a loss. Let's move forward along our different stages of life, remembering different important bonds that you may have had, relationships that meant something to you, different projects. It doesn't matter how old you were when you had these projects, even if you were really young, or perhaps a trip, an outing, something you wanted to buy. And more transcendental projects, perhaps an academic project, or a project you had with your partner, with your spouse, or with your family. And just keep moving forward, thinking of your life. Acknowledge achievements, obstacles, frustrations. And let's focus on the most meaningful ones. Which ones do I think left a bigger mark? Which ones were forks on the road of my life, and I took one of those forks? And by doing that, I closed the doors on other choices, on other paths. And now we're going to think about where we are right now Where am I living? Who am I living with? Who am I not living with? What do I do? What am I doing right now? And now, let's acknowledge the last milestone, the last important decision I made, and the last meaningful experience I've had that's left a mark on my life. And these big milestones, small milestones, they will talk about me, about my nature, where my passions lie, where my empathies lie, what my emotions are. And they will allow me to recognize my true essence. And now, little by little, let's come back to the here and now, where we are, where we're sitting, or where we're standing. All here, gathered here together. If your eyes are closed, you may now open them. And this is an exercise, as you can see, that you can do over days or even longer, so that you can go through your autobiography. It's very important, because as you identify these milestones, then you can go through that path, and while going through it, you will recognize that nature that is within you, even though it hasn't developed the basis of your true nature. It's very important to recognize it, to acknowledge it, and to have a north, some guidelines, so that you can go into this archetypal world. Quick question, Eduardo. When I look at my life, what kind of questions can I ask myself that can be useful to identify areas that I have developed and areas that I haven't? Well, it's better not to ask yourself anything. When you get to a milestone that is a fork in your life, this is an additional exercise. You can think, what might have happened if I'd gone the other way, if I'd taken the other fork, if instead of going down road A, I had gone down road B? What would have happened if instead of having gone to live with my parents abroad, I had stayed, because I could have stayed? What would have happened? What if? What if? That is an additional exercise to this one.
Thank you. Also, when I'm looking at my milestones, how do I find this nature? Is it a question? Is it not a question? It's a very important question. When we're connected to nature, we know it. We know it. This allows me to differentiate between what is mine and what have I taken on as if it were mine? What have I adopted as my own because of demands or requirements, and I adopted it because that's what my parents expected of me or my culture asked of me. And once we start make this or differentiate this, that is the first step. And according to the Jungian map, you can start to differentiate what is the dimension of my biography with all of the complexities from the dimension of that is much deeper part of the psyche, which is my nature. Inevitably, there's a marriage between biography and nature. But like all marriages, we hope that it's a happy marriage. Thank you. It's very interesting to practice being here and now and having a space to access our internal peace as we learned with Aura Sofia. It's also important to have the long-term perspective that Eduardo is asking to us to look back at all of our life, at all of our life. And this is a real inflection point that we have to ask ourselves, are we doing what we want or are we doing because others are asking this of us? And working with these general contradictions is very helpful and very important for our well-being. Something else that is very important right now during COVID is emotions. We're feeling stressed. We're feeling a little bit anxious. We're feeling just in a general bad mood. And how do we handle these emotions when they push off to the extremes, when they get really intense? How can we feel less anger, stress, anxiety? Aura Sofia, would you like to start? Oof, this is my weak point, which is the emotions, the world of emotions. I liked when you talked about difficult feelings because I don't like to call them negative and positive emotions. For me, negative emotions don't really tell me that it's actually, it misinforms me. Anger can be my friend because it says what I want, but I'm not able to get. And in general, there is below every emotion and every feeling is love because if I want it and I don't give it to myself, what is this telling me? It's telling me that you're feeling frustrated. If I want something but I lost it, that's sadness. Below each emotion, there's a desire that you're not getting, that you're not achieving, or something you're not reaching. So, positive psychology for me says focus on the positive emotions, go after those positive emotions, and that's what I do. And I believe that to always be positive and to have these positive feelings, you have to understand the negative feelings and you have to deal with them and work with them. You have to understand them, understand what it is I want, or what is it that I wanted but I lost? What is it that I want when I'm extremely angry because they tell me something I don't want to hear? So I remind myself about these feelings need to be looked at like they're first class citizens. They're just like we think about thoughts. When you have thoughts, when you write a book, you go to the library catalog and you register your book and these are your words and you've got a copyright and you thought these thoughts and wrote them out in a book. But the world of feelings is just as much yours as the world of thoughts. What does this mean? This means that if I feel something when you do something, is that your fault? You're doing things. Remember, we got thoughts, actions, and feeling. Thoughts, feelings, actions. So we got a couple people here. Someone someone's doing something, someone gets angry, someone gets less angry, and then the third person says, "Huh, why are you guys angry?" It was the same action, three different responses. So long-term memory in the hippocampus remembers and brings to light feelings that are boiling up, long-held feelings from the past. They bubble up like a bubbling cauldron. I think it was Jung who said that. So this bubbling cauldron is very interesting. If you increase the flames, turn up the heat, it's going to bubble over. So what's happening? We're what's deepest in that cauldron is what we're focusing on, is what we're seeing, is what's bubbling up. So what should we do? Should we lower the flame, lower the heat in your emotional being that you have in the long term, your long-term memories? For example, I have a pet peeve. I don't like when people put their hands on their hips when they tell me something. That's my pet peeve. But why does it bother me so much? What's the problem with them putting their hands on their hips? So I did a little bit of Eduardo's exercise. I went into my past and I looked at myself. And my mother, when she was mad at me, and she would walk into the room, wherever you were, or wherever you were, and of course she would say your whole full name, right? It'd be your full name, Ahora Sofia, and she'd walk in like this with her hands on her hips, and I would shake in fear. So when people put their hands on their hips, I think back to when my mother would scold me. So the emotional world is recorded. It's written inside. I I feel what you feel with your actions, or do I feel what I feel when you act as you act? That's the question. My emotional world is as important as my thoughts. I have to recognize, though, that the other person who is doing whatever is simply the trigger that causes me to respond or react. You should never say, you made me feel angry. You shouldn't say it, you, and you shouldn't point your finger. You did it. I'm the one feeling angry. And I need to understand why your actions made me angry, why I felt angry. The emotional world is based on, number one, feeling. You have to feel this emotional world. It's important for our physical being. Two, we need to know how to express it and know how to express those very difficult emotions, right? And thirdly, when it's a difficult feeling, you have to negotiate with it. You have to learn how to negotiate with it, dialogue with it. This emotional world is the secret of life. It's a secret of human beings. It's what makes human beings human. And this is what is lacking in the world. And it's what's lacking for everything we know that we take to action. We're missing this link that it goes through this emotional world, that it heats up, a little bit, just a little bit before we act. Because when we act coldly, you lose that connection. You feel it and you lose that connection. So I always say, we have to act on what we're taught, as Eduardo said. It's very easy to say it. It's very easy to say it, but difficult to achieve it. Achieving it is what will allow human beings to expand our consciousness. The more aware and conscientious we are of what our being, what we're feeling with these actions, the better we are as human beings. I hope that was clear. So the world of feelings, I love difficult feelings. I love hard feelings. I learn from them because I understand what they're telling me. They've got a message for me. For example, worry. What is worry? It's it's a preoccupation. You're occupied, you're with your thoughts are occupied, preoccupied with something. What's fear? Fear. It can even be imaginary. Fear could we let's say I want to go into the future. No, 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 no. You can't do it right now. You can't always do it right now. You're worried about the future. You're worried about the future. Live in today. Be present and be thankful for today. But if you are worried, if you see a very positive future, then go with it, run with it. But don't be negative with your imagination. That's what leads to stress, that tires you out, and it tires you out unnecessarily. It's like a horse that gallops off. You have to be very careful with this horse, and you have to guide it because it's just running off, and it may run off and eat the wrong thing. So you've got to take the reins in and guide it to the right pastures. My right brain can be actually damaging if it has full control. It's got to be a mix of both brains, of both sides. The world of feelings is perhaps for me is something I continue to dig into it. It excites me. I'm surfing it. I'm surfing through this world and I mix it up with feelings. It's all of this heat that boils up in me. It pulses through my veins. Feelings are the heat in your life. But you need to learn how to guide them just like you guide your thoughts. And because there's such a range of feelings, like violence. What's violence? Violence is a small frustration that led to anger, and anger obviously doesn't solve anything. So that leads to violence. It started with a small frustration, an unrecognized frustration. It started to grow and grow, grow in that bubbling cauldron, and it spilled over. So then you see the three brains. This is a feeling that I felt so much, I wasn't able to address it, and it pushed over into my brain, and it led to an action, or to a violent word, or to some violence. And I believe that our job is to recognize the feelings so that we can add heat and love to these actions. That's what I believe.
Any questions or any comments? Eduardo? There's a question about our relationship with difficult emotions. Well, after this lecture, amazing lecture by Sofia, I just want to highlight a few things additionally, and to go back to a few things we've already talked about. First, to go back to the importance of living in an integrated fashion between thinking and doing. We have a task because we need to act according to how we're thinking. If you do that, that will be something that will allow you to achieve major positive results. And as for emotions, I agree with Aura. If we are able to focus our curiosity on asking ourselves, what is this emotion telling me? Then there's enough work there to get to know yourself. That will help you to get to know yourself much better. You know, like fear as an emotion. Sometimes being afraid is important to remove yourself from situations. Feeling fear is important to let you know if you want to take a step back or forward, because often people think fear is a negative emotion, and somehow fear allows me to defend myself from something or allows me to realize you're taking a step outside your comfort zone. And often when you're growing, when you're maturing, when you're evolving, you need to take that step despite fear. If others can do it, you can do it yourself, like my godmother used to tell me. So that's the first thing. Like Aura said, you need to acknowledge those emotions and to be made accountable for those emotions. I'm the one feeling those emotions. You need to relate to those emotions, and you are the only person who can do anything about those emotions, no one else. Something else that is crucial when acknowledging emotions as general information, it's important to know that sometimes you feel emotions that have nothing to do with what you're going through. Going back to the origins of how I started studying psychology, there are some emotions when sometimes you're really afraid. Through modeling, you have learned, or because you've gone through certain situations, you have learned. Instead of the fear you're feeling, you express anger. So there are many angry people around who are actually really, really afraid. It's important to know that, because all emotions have energy that people are trying to get rid of. And when they get rid of those emotions, you go back to the start. If you are unable to express the real emotion you're feeling, that energy just stays there and starts to create a feeling that is uncomfortable. So there are many people who are angry, going afraid, and what they're actually feeling is fear. Obviously, it's not as easy and as simple as I'm portraying it. So when you recognize that you're afraid and you acknowledge that fear, the anger begins to go away, like Aura said. It's like a bubbling cauldron, but that bubbling cauldron is crucial. Every single one of us, in isolation, we reach a level at which we start to feel very uncomfortable about the emotions we're feeling. We can only take anxiety up to a point. We can only take fear up to a point. We can only take anger up to a point. We can only take pain up to a point. And that point needs to be known. You need to know what that point is. Your inner limits. Because when the energy load of your emotions overflows, goes past that point, goes past your ability to contain those emotions, then you start feeling bad, and it often leads to disease. Psychosomatic diseases have to do with an overload of emotions. Medically, it's called a fistula that allows that energy to leave the body, and then things get complicated because you cannot metabolize that energy. Anyway, that's what I wanted to say. Those were my comments following what Aura said. And I think it helps us understand how important it is to be connected to our emotions. And in conclusion, on that topic, there's something a quote that says, when the brain realizes what we want, the brain will find a way to take you there. That's why idealizing something, mentalizing something, thinking of something is a way to get you there. It's important to have certain goals. We've talked about peace, as Aura said, how we can achieve peace. Another one is how can we achieve trust? When I can connect to myself and to life through trust, usually that exercise with the emotional world becomes simpler. because it's not coming from the outside. The world is no longer catastrophic. I understand and I trust that is what happening has to do with me as a learning point, as a way of helping me change it, or as a way of helping me navigate it. So being able to have that trust and that peace is crucial, even if it's just as a reference point. And another element, I don't want to finish this session without mentioning it because it's crucial. It's also something else Ara said, being grateful. Right now, we know it's been proven that knowing how to say thank you is infinitely powerful for two reasons. One, because it allows you to understand everything you enjoy right here and right now. And secondly, because indirectly, it makes you humble. Ego doesn't own your life. It doesn't own your journey. And I am grateful because there are things that happen to me and I was lucky for them to happen to me. So being thankful and saying thanks as an exercise, as a life experience is vital. Thank you. I have one last question. I don't know if you're going to have an easy time answering it, but it's very hard to manage when someone is a trigger and you're dealing with a tough emotion in real time. So let's say I'm fighting with a co-director or I was stressed out by a relative. Is there anything practical that you can share with us that we can do when we feel that trigger? Well, I have a tip. To find some support, something you can do. So I'm having a fight with my boss, things are getting heated. What can I do? What can I do? I'm not being able to negotiate my way out of the situation. What can I do? Can I ask to be excused for a little while to leave this meeting? Can I ask her to think a little bit more on this and then we can meet again later? There's a can I? Can I? What can I do? Even if it's a small, what can I do that will give me a tiny bit of satisfaction at that time? So what you teach or what you're teaching is something like, if nothing is being done for me, then I'll do it myself. And that's the truth. If nobody's giving me what I want, then I will give it to myself. If they're talking to me in a certain way and I feel that it is disrespectful, and I realize that what I need right now is respect, I will give that respect to myself. If what I want to do is to, I don't know, to go out somewhere, well, we can't go out anywhere right now, but if I want somebody to buy me something and nobody buys it for me, do I need to get mad? Do I need to get furious? Or can I get it for myself? Because I can't just sit back and wait for people to do things for me. I have to do them for myself. Depending on others, waiting for others to meet your needs, to satisfy your needs, and saying that others make you mad, others are being awful to you, then you're depending on other people's actions. And the other thing I wanted to say about what Eduardo said is that emotions have to do with gender. There are male emotions and more female emotions. Men are sad, for instance. a sad man. Men are sentimental. Women are furious. It's better for men to be furious and for women to be more sensitive, more emotional, because sometimes we get furious, we get mad. We think, I can't believe this is happening. And men become sad. And sometimes you think, I'm just really frustrated about what's been happening to me. But what I do is get sad. So there's a misunderstanding there. You're frustrated, but you're feeling sad. And appreciation. That's another important point. Criticisms go towards something that was badly done, and appreciation goes towards the person that is going to have to rectify that action. You did something wrong, and you're not going to tell me because I'm going to feel uncomfortable because you did something that I didn't want you to do that was badly done. Now, if I appreciate the person, I can criticize the action. And the appreciation is the first kind of warmth you can convey to human beings. So we talk about three things: appreciation through the brain. Appreciate, you need to appreciate things. With a warm brain, you love, and with a cold brain, you criticize. You cannot criticize your son because he did badly on his test. What you can do is to say, what would you like me to do to help you so that you can do better in school? Because you're not doing so well in X, Y, and Z. I support, I appreciate, and I love. That's it. Thank you, Eduardo. Any advice on dealing with our triggers? Well, in conclusion, there's not much left to say after what Aura said, but I think something that can be helpful when you get to a point where you have an emotional overload is to take some time out. Take some time out and pay attention to specific situations. That's crucial because we know that if you go past a certain point, there's no going back. That's it. You cannot go back to where you were before. A bond is broken, and so being able to take that time out is important, and to be able to ask for that time out is important. You say, let's just take some time and let's talk about this later, because when you get to that point and knowing what that point is allows you to ask for some time out. And you need to be able, what your tolerance threshold is. If you're talking to a teenager and things start getting heated, you say, okay, that's it. Let's just take a breather and let's go back to this later on. We can pick this up again later. December, just before Christmas time, you know, it's a stressful time. Are we going to your parents or are we going to my parents? And everybody starts getting stressed out. And that's a time to say, okay, let's take some time out and think about this. And also, when there's a meeting or a conversation going on and emotions start to arise, you need to watch out for them and to say, you said something that upset me. It upset me. But if at a given moment you lose track of your emotions, often you just explode. So before you get to that point, again, make sure you ask for some time out. And a more complex concept, but very important, is to be aware of our complexes. At least that's what we call them in Jungian psychology. If you're aware of your complexes, everything's going to work well until somebody says something that touches a nerve. It's a nerve, exposed nerve. If anybody touches an exposed nerve, you reach the timeout point in no time. So you need to be aware of your complexes. It's a raw nerve. And you need to acknowledge your inner world, your complexes, and you need to be aware that somebody is touching a raw nerve. That's it. Thank you, Eduardo. Thank you, Sofia. Thanks to the Wellbeing Project team for providing us with this forum. Everyone working on the technology, translating. It's been wonderful to be here together in this intimate space. And I just wanted to say that we'll have another webinar in Brazil, and we'll have simultaneous translation, both into Portuguese and into English on the 4th of August. We'll have Jairo Pereira and Monja Coindan. Thank you so much, everyone. And I hope I haven't forgotten anything. And we can conclude our session. Thanks, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you, Eduardo. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you, Aura, for your wonderful, wonderful company. Thank you so much. It's been amazing. Thank you.
Gracias.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.